Hello, this is Corey. Before we get started, I want to share with you a new thing I'm doing for the Cincinnati business leaders. In January of this year, I launched the Prioritize Leader Academy and brought together 8 different business leaders and owners. And we meet once a month, as well as have coaching in between our different sessions. So basically, it's a mastermind, but we've added strong content, incorporated faith into the piece. And so it has gone so well that in October, we are launching our second cohort. So if you are a business leader or a business owner and you are looking for community, you are looking for coaching, you are looking for additional content to help push you forward, then reach out. Love to give you more information on what this looks like. You can email me at corey@coreymcarlson.com or go ahead and give me a call, 720-301-8377. And this is for any Cincinnati business owner or leader who is looking to grow over this next 12-month period. Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Corey Carson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode. Today's episode is a good one. It is with Brandon Carson. You'll learn more about him in a minute, but he's been an executive at all big name companies for his whole career, currently at Walmart. A lot of the stuff we talk about is applicable in all of our lives. The 2 big takeaways that I have that I kind of want to share with you right now is one is the way he blocks his time. He is very busy, has lots of demands on his time being with Walmart, but yet he blocks out his time in the morning, in the midday, and at the end of the day. They're non-negotiables in his schedule. He gets it done. And so often when I think about my own life, as well as working with clients, it is, I don't have enough time to do this, or I can't do that because I'm so busy. But Brandon makes it a priority to block out time for reflection. Without technology, where he just reflects on the business, on life, and that is one of the key things that he says that's helped him become successful. So I think all of us need to think about, if a big-time executive with Walmart believes blocking out time is key, maybe we should do the same. And then another big part was this conversation that we have about his conversations with his mom and how impactful it is. Can't wait for you to hear that part because I've thought about it since that podcast. Hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. Hello, this is Corey Carlson. You're listening to Win at Home First podcast. Today I'm joined by Brandon Carson. And first of all, his resume is very impressive from the companies that are on there. Currently, he is the Vice President of Learning and Leadership for Walmart. Before that, he was at Delta and then Home Depot, Microsoft, Yahoo. Just unbelievable different companies that he's worked for. He has 2 books out there. The most recent one, the one that's out there now, is L&D's Playbook about learning and development. And he is at the forefront of helping companies, specifically obviously Walmart, learning how to adapt to really the changing technology. And in the process, I met him via LinkedIn, following some of the things he was posting were interesting. And so I reached out, made a connection to talk about winning at home, times he didn't win at home, faith, all those pieces. And so here we are today to learn from Brandon. So thank you very much for saying yes to being on the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Corey. It's good to meet you virtually and great to be here.
Brandon, what is the key trait for leaders to win both at work and at home?
So I would say the biggest thing I've learned through my career, but also in my personal life, is just building trust and authenticity, bringing your real self. A lot of what we've seen during COVID is lots of folks kind of at first being forced to bring their personal life forward because we all had to go home to work, or at least a lot of us did. And through that experience, we've seen more about people's personal lives than we had ever had an opportunity to see before in the past. And so I think that really helps for people to gain deeper understanding of those that they work with. That used to be before the pandemic, if you will, but even before that, that when you came to work, you might be bringing a different self. A lot of places didn't support work, a lot of talk and, those kinds of things about your personal life. Or when you brought yourself in, you had to bring yourself in a certain way. And so one of the great things about what we've been through over the last year and a half is a little bit of breaking down those barriers and really getting to know individuals from where they're coming from. And so I would think that authenticity is great. That's what I've always sought to be, is just this is my real self. This is what I'm bringing forward, and trying to do it in the most constructive way and in the most positive manner I can, but not shying away from what's important for me at home and in my professional life as well.
So over the years, how were you either successful or not successful building trust and authenticity?
Well, it's a journey. So we're on a journey, and there are competing factors sometimes that we have to navigate, as we make our way through life on our journey. There have been challenges when you're wanting to, when I've had times when I've wanted to, break through a barrier or get promoted, or, what am I doing in this role? How can I please those around me, please my senior leaders, the folks that I'm working with, and then balance that with the pressures that you have as a family person and trying to build a really good structure at home for your spouse, your partner, your kids, those that you love, your family, your broader family. And even more challenging when you're dispersed, when your broader family is dispersed and things like that. And there was a time I remember before all this technology, Corey, when when I would sometimes go weeks without talking to my parents or something, before FaceTime and all of that. So I think it's just finding that balance and, making sure that you're visible and you're available to those that need you and those that support you. I remember for several years during my career, I was a consultant. And the great thing about that was during a time when my daughter was really young, before she started school. I was able to build in the space I needed around my professional life to devote to spending time with her, and not just be in this trap of 9 to 5 and, just running home after that to try to get some kid time, if you will. So it was great in that work was, back then, work was flexible enough for me to be able to build in family time and make it feel more natural instead of just forced, if you will.
How did you build space in your work? Obviously, you work from some big name companies, right? Walmart and Delta and Home Depot, all those. Some people are probably listening like, how in the world did he do that with those big companies where their demands are probably very high to work?
I had a meeting once with the CEO of Sun Microsystems. There were several of us in the room where he was just meeting. He was meeting with different levels of people in the organization, just having a conversation. And one thing he said stuck out to me. He said, choose your manager really well, because they're the key to a meaningful work life for you. And that really struck me. And so in all of my, throughout the rest of my career, I've been real intentional about making choices that allows that balance to come to life. And, sometimes it's a challenge because you do get pressure from work, especially if your scope and span of control is pretty broad, or if you get, into a position where you're leading lots of other people, that kind of thing. But you've got to really remember that, where the priorities lie for you as it applies to that, and bake that in. And I do simple things like I reserve time on my calendar and I don't let that get corrupted. I have prep time in the mornings before I go into meetings. I have a midday hour and a half that I block, and then an afternoon hour and a half to review the day that I block. And I don't let that impede upon that time for reflection you need. I mean, a lot of us are in these, especially during this work at home situation, a lot of us are in these situations where it's constant Zoom meetings or back to back. You need that time to reflect and consider all of what went on during the day. So you've got to be real guarded, and you've got to protect your time, and you've got to be able to turn it off and turn on your family life or your whatever other priorities there are for you. And it has to be intentional, and it has to be supported by your leadership. We've got to be real intentional about establishing the right priorities for us and for our families, and frankly, for our communities as well.
But you said a couple things that I love to implement in my own life. And sometimes, clients try it and they're unsuccessful. Sometimes they do it and they have success. And that is this idea of blocks throughout the day to focus on you and your workload. For me, I had this, it's 2 to 3, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, where I would be blocked. I would not look at anything except, a whiteboard, pen and paper, whatever it is, to get strategic and think. And I loved it. It was great. And if people were like, hey, Corey, you need to have a meeting, but you're busy from 2 to 3, can you move it? Well, if I could move it somewhere else in the day, I'd be like, yeah, I'll talk to the other people involved. I'll see if I can move it. Right. Little did they know it was just me. And other times I would not, I wouldn't move it, and I'd just have them find a new time, but I would do my best never to delete it. So I love it. I had tons of breakthrough during that time. I want to hear a little bit more about yours, because it sounds like you have more of them, which is quite impressive. And, what do you do during that time? So you have 3. What's the morning one, midday, and then afternoon?
I literally try not to have any technology around me. And the roles I've been in, especially at technology companies, are all about technology. And how many screens do we have available to us? Literally in this room right now, I've got 5 or 6 screens sitting around me. But I really felt the pull of the screens taking over. And so when I do my prep time in the morning, it's a 1-hour prep time. Other than I wake up pretty early and do my workout, my breakfast, my reflection time with what's happening in the world, that doesn't count. I'm talking about intentional prep time for my day, which is not just work, but it's also just thinking about what I want to happen during the day. What am I grateful for as I start the day out? I've known a lot of folks in my life lately that have been impacted by the pandemic. I know some people who have died. There's been other situations. And so that time is really just to center myself. There's not technology involved. Literally, I've got a sofa in this room. I'm usually just sitting at the sofa thinking, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but how often, and I'll ask your audience, how often do you absolve yourself of things to be distracting you and just sit and reflect and think? So that's a good solid hour that I try to do that every day. And it's pretty easy in that respect because no one's really bothering me yet. There's nothing really at work that's driving too much going on. And candidly, my daughter's grown, so I'm not getting kids off to school and that kind of thing. So I know it's a luxury for me now to do that. But I would argue that that's really important.
What time is that, real quick, Brandon?
That's from 8 to 9.
8 to 9.
There are no meetings from 8 to 9. I am getting prepped for my day through some reflection, some power thinking about what I want the day to be, what I hope to achieve, and also what am I grateful for as I start the day.
How do you stay disciplined to not have that idea at 8:15 of I need to email, Bill, and how do you not hop up and go send the email?
Right. I'm not saying it's an undisciplined activity, but now that I've shaped that, I can't live without it. And here's the other challenge that may come up for folks. If the place you work at, there are cultural dynamics. Right now, I'm fortunate. I'm working at home. I don't have a commute, so I can direct this energy in that way, the energy I have in that way, versus spending it on the highway getting to work or worrying about getting in the car and doing that. So when I say it's a luxury, it really is. But life is terribly short, and we've got to find those ways to get our mental acuity developed, right? So that we can be better, to your point, winning at work, winning at home. I mean, these are important. That's an important hour for me. And I think you have to prioritize that somehow in your life. And for some people, that may be too much of a challenge, or you may integrate some kind of technology into your reflection time, whatever works for you. But that's working well for me now. And then in the middle of the day, I found myself literally grabbing food quickly over my computer, doing what, my keyboard, doing kind of what you're talking about, where I'm just, scarfing something down while I'm emailing because it's a captured hour. I'm like, hey, nobody's bothering me. Then I realized, and I don't want to sound trite, but moving away from the screens and respecting the food you're eating, respecting that moment of nourishment, that hour, give yourself that hour to not scarf it down, but be truthful to your body, be good to your body. I work out in the morning. I do a 5K every morning. I'm healthy. Why am I like scarfing this food down while I'm working over my keyboard, getting my keyboard disgusted, right? So I decided I'm not going to be around technology. I'm going to take my hour and eat, and then I'm going to make sure I spend some time taking some notes and just some thoughts. I have a journal that I do midday, and that's important. That I have found that important. And in the office, it's even harder, right? When you're working in the office, it's even harder to be disciplined like that. It's a little easier at home, I will admit.
What time is that afternoon session?
That's 4 to 5.
I mean, you've got these dialed in, you know exactly when they are, and you honor them.
The best thing to do is get on your Outlook or whatever you use for your calendaring device and lock them in. And then when someone wants to interrupt them or collide with them, then you've got to make those decisions. Is this, is this the CEO? Then you might have to make some decisions, but at least if they're there, they're guarded. And I actually got this thought. It all dawned on me to do this when I was working with one of the senior leaders at Delta. I was in his office working with him on something. I glanced up at his calendar on his Outlook, and he had the whole week view. And I saw that he had similar blocks. And this is a senior leader, a senior vice president. And I'm like, you know what? This person with this scope and span of control and level of responsibility is blocking his time as well. I can do that.
What's interesting, when I wrote Went Home First, I came across this idea that we kind of, think is true, but in a guy by the name of Jeff Blunt, who in the book Fanatical Prospecting talks about, these two different, kind of theories. And the one is the idea that our time contracts when we need it to. So if we've got 10 hours of work and we need to get it done in 8 hours a day, it actually happens. And anyone who's thinking that's not true, it's like, yeah, it is. Anytime you go on vacation, what does the Friday before vacation look like? You crank out so much. You send out emails to people. You can proofread documents. You call the person you didn't want to call because you want to get it off the checklist. You do all these things. So our work, in fact, can contract. But the opposite is also true. Work can expand. So we can take a 4-hour workload, expand to 8 hours. We start to work, and then it's like, you know what? I'm going to go get some coffee.
Exactly.
I'm going to look at my social media feed and see what happened. And so I think when you put down your blocks, your batches of time, you had to see that, come to fruition.
Yes. And, you can actually get a really good indicator too of how productive and effective you can be. I love that, what you just said, because it's so true. And I struggle with this procrastination demon that's always within me, right? And we've built an ecosystem of distraction that's available to us, and all of these devices that are around us are almost built to try to pull us in, right? And so I do feel you have to be more intentional about that, but time is your most precious currency. And you've got to respect it. And I love the idea that you're talking about, because I have found myself being much more productive when I just don't put things off. One thing that we're doing, I've noticed the culture here is really great about, is the calendars are all set by default to 25-minute meetings, so that you do have that 5-minute gap between back-to-back Zoom, right? Because some people go right to the hour, whatever, and just get right into the next one. So a little bit of thought collecting there. And then there's a cultural norm here where if the meeting's done, then drop it, move on, and if it's 15 minutes and we shared all the information. I've literally been in meetings where people will try to, we've got 25 minutes or we have 30 minutes. Let's just have an open forum. No, let's cut it and let's go do things. And so I think some of those cultural dynamics help with that too. And if they're not there, you can introduce them, right? Because nobody will argue about you giving time back to them. They will not argue to not have that, right?
So Brandon, there's someone listening. There's a devil's advocate out there saying, man, it sounds like for 3 hours a day, you're sitting on the couch daydreaming. You are somehow cranked out 2 books. VP at one of the largest companies in the world, something's not adding up. How are you doing this? What is the tip or the idea, or kind of open up our eyes to see kind of how this is working?
Well, think about it too. That's a good point, but think about it. My professional life has been at companies that move quickly. An airline everything was in an hour, right? A flight turns every hour. Retail, it's all about execution, and even in the tech world, I mean, that's obviously a fast moving space. And so the only way that I've found to be really effective at that is to be able to concentrate when I'm there, when I'm present for work. I'm a better and more productive worker because I do take that time to put some space and some breath around the complexity and challenge of when you're actually working and focused. My daughter told me this not too long ago, because to your point, I've written 2 books. I have a foundation that I am a principal part of, and then I have this job. And she told me the other day, she's like, Dad, everything you do in your personal life does seem to be about what you do when you're working. And, some of it's just me trying to architect a system that I'm ensuring I'm giving back as much or more than I receive, right, from the community in which I serve. But it was one of those call to actions for me because, it's like, I love to write, I love to share my thoughts, but these books are about what I do in my profession. They're not about photography or fly fishing, right? So it's like, I need to find some of that space that's not constructed around what I've chosen to be my profession as well. And that's a challenge, I'll admit to.
Well, just to wrap up this whole idea, I love how, Mr. Technology, who, spends all of his time with technology, is saying no technology to have great breakthrough. So I love that. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I want to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work, and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And the last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much. Brandon, another topic I want to talk to you about that I know a lot of listeners think about, I do as well, and that's this idea of ambition. From the standpoint, you have worked with brands that we all know of. We know the names, and you've had executive roles. And a lot of those roles I know they still are dependent on a team, but you're carrying that brand of learning and leadership, learning and development to all of those different places. So there's a lot of people looking at you. So how did you balance out that selfish ambition versus a godly ambition? Finding the work-life balance from the standpoint that you weren't working all the time. It wasn't about your glory. How did you navigate that?
So career-wise, my career or jobs were always there to feed what I wanted to achieve in my personal life and in my, finding the right reasons to live and to be healthy and to be productive and to give back to others. So I've had some great career experiences, but they're all about building capability in others. And so that's really what my focus has been. And as I've moved up into more senior positions in some of these organizations, the focus has always stayed on, well, how do I serve those that work with me? And how do I serve the communities in which we work and live and try to make better for everyone else around us? Now, I don't want to make that sound all Pollyanna and like I'm just this wonderful person, because it's not all about that. But for me, ambition is not like how high can I get or how much money can I make? Because I never was taught the value of money other than it feeds you and clothes you and puts a roof over your head. Now, what can you do with that to help other people and all of that?
How did you just have a piece come 4 o'clock? It's time for your strategy session to stop work, to stop the to-dos because you had these demands. You work for public companies, but yet you just had this piece. So how can you share that with us so that we can grab a hold of some of that?
When I got to Apple, one of the things was they really strip a lot of that away because the work is very collaborative. And you're expected when you're working with a program or you're on something that you become a part of, you're expected to share your thoughts, ideas, approaches, and perspectives with your coworkers and others around you to get feedback on that. And the first time I did that and got feedback, and it wasn't necessarily good feedback, that really went straight to my ego. And ego can be the biggest problem for us, right? In so many ways. And I felt like they had just ripped the skin off my face, right? In the feedback. But then later on reflection, all of what they were saying would make it a better product that I was working on. And so stripping myself of that ego has really opened doors like you would not believe for me, not only in work, but in my personal life. And it has made me, infused me with a humble spirit. And I think if you get yourself to that point, and Corey, I'm not saying it's easy, it's a challenge, especially as you climb the ladder a bit, always serving others from a point of humility and stripping yourself of that ego will take you places much further than you could expect.
I love your story of Apple collaboration. I think so often anytime we get feedback, we need to hear it as critique and not criticism.
Exactly. Constructively. Right.
Absolutely. I love when you talk to older couples who have been married for years and you say, hey, was your relationship 50-50? And they're like, no, it's 100-100. And it's that idea of we are serving each other. And, there's days I'm obviously a cruddy husband. I obviously try to minimize those days. But a lot of the days it's trying to think, hey, how can I serve Holly? And I actually think she wins that award because it's always serving me and doing things that kind of, it's like, how did you know I'd, want that while you're out and about? It's just, it's pretty neat. As you're talking ego, as you're talking collaboration, obviously a lot of your examples are coming straight from big corporations. I know a lot of the listeners are entrepreneurs or in a space like myself where, yes, I was in corporate, but now as I'm an entrepreneur and building a coaching practice, collaboration still wins out. I mean, if I have a heart of collaboration versus competition, as I'm meeting people on LinkedIn, as I'm talking to other coaches and authors or speakers, if I have that heart of collaboration, that heart of giving, and it's an abundant mindset as opposed to it's competitive. All right, they're a coach, I'm a coach. Let's go battle. And trust me, I want to win everything. I mean, I'm very competitive, but man, when things have changed, when I've shifted more to the spirit of collaboration, abundant mindset. Brandon, part of my story is this idea of one particular night, I just felt God say, hey, you need to hand over your story for a greater story. And this idea of, hey, my way was no longer working. I need to hand over and be a participant in God's story as opposed to trying to be the main character in my story. So for you, Brandon, as I say that, is there something that comes to mind of, yes, there was that time where I had to hand it over. My way wasn't working.
Yeah, there's an exact moment, and I'll be transparent with this, but my mom passed. She lived separate from me. I didn't live near her, but the last conversation I had with her, Corey, was ugly. We literally devolved into anger and name calling. And the next few weeks later, my sister found her dead in her house. And so I've often reflected back on my last conversation with my mom, and it was a shocking death. It wasn't expected. And she was young. She was 61. My last conversation with my mom was one of anger. And I'd give my right arm for 3 minutes back to correct that. And that was when I had a moment where We've talked about humility, service to others. That was a moment where I felt like I was not on the right path, and I needed to think differently about how I build relationships and how I foster them and how I bring something of value to them. Because how did I get to the point where there were angry words to my parent and then she passed, and I have no way to correct that now. So that was a big moment for me. I don't know if it was God speaking to me or what, but it was, you need to change the trajectory you're on. And so that was a big moment for me.
It's a powerful story. You still carry head trash around because of that?
There's an interesting kind of epilogue to this in some ways. So, I had an iPhone. She had left a message on my iPhone in between that argument that we had, which was not on the phone, and her passing. And I had listened to that message, and honestly, Corey, it gave me some comfort in that it was a little bit of a pleading message. Let's talk, that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I'll just keep this on my phone. I'll save it, and messages you listen to after 30 days, they delete them automatically. So I'm looking at my phone at one point and the message is just gone. And I panicked. I'm like, this is the last message from my mother that I have recorded in her life, right? And it was a message of some positivity after having that conversation, right? Where I was never able to talk back to her. And I panicked. And a good friend of mine said, I think I can recover that message for you. And he found some software and he was able to recover that message. I was able to move it to a computer and save it. And I swear, I praised him like you wouldn't believe. I said, you don't know what you've done for my life, but you've changed the last message I have for my mother, which gives me some kind of comfort, right? But it's like this technology just sometimes offers us so much and gives so much to us, but boy, can it take a lot away in an instant, right? So it's just a funny story to that. And it's just helped me along the way when I think about that incident.
Have you asked for forgiveness of that moment?
Oh, many times over. And it helps inform, like I said, it helps inform kind of my whole how I build relationships. And is there anything now that can even come to part of that, especially in work or in your personal life? Is anything really that bad, right? And let's work on it. There's no reason to get that angry over anything, frankly. And don't let your ego play into it. Don't let your passion overrun you. Be sensible. It's a challenge. I'm not pretending, but I swear those times you block, those spaces you put around you, the people you put around you, the choices you make, they all play into this. And so it helped me change my life completely.
Oh man, it's a neat story with restoration. Have you noticed any time since, and I know you're getting better by the day by having that block time, but almost where you're feeling your blood start to boil, or you're feeling I'm starting to get my ego in the way, I'm about to snap at this person, or whatever it looks like. Not that it would get to the levels of that day with your mom, but have you noticed you're going the wrong direction in a particular conversation, and you've got a system, you've got a way to check yourself to say, I'm out, I got to go catch my breath?
I don't know if it's a system, but it's understanding what those triggers are and working on that and trying, like I say a lot of times, just making better. I mean, that's what and being humble enough to be okay asking others for help, and that was not something that is respected in my family, that the men didn't ask for help. You didn't do that. And you being okay with that, and people knowing the people that are around you. It's real important to be intentional about who you surround yourself with, and making sure that those people value you and for who you are. I'm always working on that, Corey. It's not something that, okay, that's done, now we move forward. Now I'm always working on it.
But you have an awareness, and you probably raise an awareness for listeners of that, and giving some very practical tips and just thoughts of how to overcome it. So I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that story. Brandon, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and just learning from you as we both talked before it's recorded. Anytime you do these podcasts, you don't know each other, and so it's like, hey, we'll see where this goes. And before we know it, it's over, and it went great. So thank you very much.
No, it's great. It's good talking to you. You have that ability to put forward a platform that is based on helping people, and so that's fantastic. It's good to meet you, and good to be able to speak to you and talk to your audience.
Well, thank you, Brandon, for taking the time. And this doesn't even count for 1 year hour blocks of dedicated non-work time. Coming up. Oh man, I totally messed up your day. All right,
right.
Brandon, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I'm really active on LinkedIn. I encourage conversations there. I like the conversations that we have. That's probably the best way. I don't do a lot of social media other than that. So
that sounds great. Well, thank you very much for being a part of the Win at Home First podcast.
All right, Corey, thank you for having me.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at coreymcarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is the podcastfactory.com.